So I'm thrilled to be invited to talk about our book on decolonizing diaconia. JungHee, my partner, passed away 2016 in January. At the time, I promised her I will finish your book in 5 years. But I moved to Vancouver. I got the new job, and my life was crazy. And last year, I finished my book and then also her book at the same time. And the books are coming. My book is coming. Came out actually February, and our book is coming. Second book is coming in a month. So I sent the second final proofreading, and the indexing work will be done next week or so, and then that is a final step. And then the book will be sent to the printers, so the book will come out. Okay, so the book will be published soon in a month or so from Peter Lang, a German publisher, his academic publisher. Before I begin, I'd like to invite you to take a moment for silent reflection on one word, servanthood. What images come to mind? Maybe humility, sacrifice, devotion, or perhaps hierarchy, invisibility, expectations of obedience. These layered associations sit at the heart of why we wrote this book, to hold the biblical and historical weight of servanthood up to the light of post-colonial, feminist, and intercultural critique. This book began with a At the JungHee's graduation as a diaconal student in the United Church of Canada at the Center for Christian Studies, she was given a towel symbolizing servanthood, following Jesus who washed his disciples' feet. But she asked, why is servanthood always the starting point of ministry? And what if language actually disempowers those on the margins? In her Korean context, she had worked alongside Minjung, the oppressed people, in labor movements in 1990s. When she came to Canada, she realized how the theology of servanthood often concealed hierarchical power, especially when applied to racialized women. So we asked, is the language of servanthood still appropriate? Or do we need a new vision of diaconia, one that lifts up dignity, justice, and mutuality? That question, is servanthood actually liberating in our context, sparked our journey, So as I said, I published my book, The Relation Without Relation. It's about my treatment on intercultural theology. This intercultural theology continues with JungHee's input or her book, our book, The Decolonizing Diakonia from Servanthood to Companionship by Peter Lang. It's a back-to-back, volume 171 and 172. So why this book? JungHee's question echoes a deeper tension, the way classical theological language can reinforce the very power imbalances it aims to transcend. The servanthood in much of Christian theology has been shaped by Eurocentric, patriarchal readings of texts like Philippians chapter 2, John chapter 13. It reads Jesus' self-emptying as an unquestioned model to imitate, often without noticing whose power is being wielded and over whom. To see those questions and to think about those questions, we set out to do two things: to critique traditional servanthood theology and reimagine diaconia as a companionship rooted in justice, dignity, and mutuality. So our central question is, how might the church's ministry shift if we understood diaconia not as serving for, but as working with? So before that, in 2022, WCC General Assembly in Karlsruhe, Germany, before the gathering, Ted Dodd asked me to attend this workshop, so Diaconia. So at the time, WCC and X Alliance presented the Call to Transformation Ecumenical Diaconia. You can get the book file from WCC website. Kind of this book is very important to make a bridge to our book. But yet this is kind of opening up the direction, but not yet. So that you may want to look at this book and our book later. But this book, the importance of this book is that this book talks about the diaconia as in between service or in between work. And also this book talks about, we Christian associate agencies, kind of faith-based agencies, work for rights-based work. So our book structure, the part 1, part 2, part 3, and the part 4. First part is retrieving diaconia in the context of mission. The part 2, diaconia as servanthood. This is a feminist critiques. Part 3 is featured on Catherine Hawkins' missiology. And the part 4, reframing diaconia. And the conclusion, diaconia as companionship. Key arguments. The first major claim, traditional servanthood theology too often perpetuates power over, rooted in sacrificial language of Eurocentric, patriarchal theologians. It tends to locate agency and authority exclusively in the servant leader, who remains in control of who receives service. It subtly enshrines the dynamic of power for and risks sliding into power over. Feminist critique marks this clear. If women's domestic labor becomes a metaphor for discipleship, then real women's voices and the leadership are sidelined. If the poor are merely recipients of charity, they are never partners in shaping mission. Reclaiming biblical diaconia. So, what is diaconia? Theologian John Collins helps us here. He argues that in the Greek, diaconia doesn't mean lowly service. It means commissioned action, a go-between role, like a delegate or emissary. So for example, in Luke chapter 22-27, Jesus says, I'm among you as one who serves. But Collins argues Jesus is not being a table waiter. He is attending to God's mission. About Acts chapter 6, the so-called daily food distribution is better understood as preaching the word, the mission task. And in Acts chapter 11, Paul and Barnabas are sent on a diaconia, again participating in God's mission, not a delivery run. Diaconia then is not about the stability, it's about participating in God's mission. And so we must ask, who is included in that mission? Who is sent? From power for to power with. Don Northward's proposal of mutuality as the ethical norm in mission pushes us further. Power for, the strong doing for the weak, even with the good intentions. Power with, shared agency. where all participants discern and enact God's mission together. So mutuality demands a new language and a new practices, listening circles, shared leadership, and reciprocal resource flows. And then we talk in Catherine Hawkins' vision. Catherine Hawkins was a Canadian missionary and educator and missiologist whose life and work significantly influenced the United Church of Canada's vision of mission and diaconia, and of course in the Center for Christian Studies. Born in China to Canadian Methodist missionaries, she grew up immersed in a cross-cultural context that shaped her theological worldview. Actually, after her education was done, the university education was done at the UBC campus where my school is, and she worked there after that in BC. So this kind of interesting connection with me since I am living and teaching at the UBC campus. So she gives us a practical model of companionship in our book, part 3, as a dynamic, dialogical, and a hopeful form of diaconia. So we trace her theological or philosophical background from China, which is intercultural, both and theology offers a model of companionship. Why companionship matters? Companionship counters hierarchical servanthood models. The traditional model of diaconia as servanthood has often been rooted in Eurocentric again and the patriarchal theology, where service is interpreted as self-sacrifice and obedience. This reinforces a powerful dynamic where one acts on behalf of the other, often with implicit superiority. Our book critiques this model as inherently flawed for post-colonial and feminist contexts because it objectifies the recipient of mission, silences and diminishes the agency of marginalized communities, and perpetuates colonial power dynamics. So we suggest from powerful dynamics to power with the relationship. Companionship, in contrast, invites power with the relationship based on mutual respect, shared agency, and co-responsibility in God's mission. Second, companionship aligns with the biblical and post-colonial understandings of mission. Drawing from John Collins' work, the book claims diaconia not as a menial service, but as a task performed on behalf of another. It's about a go-big goal. This understanding allows diaconia to be interpreted as participation in God's mission, which means diaconia rather than subservient action. Companionship better captures relational, dialogical, and participatory nature of a biblical mission, especially in Luke and Acts. It also resonates with the post-colonial theology, which demands shared space, hybridity, and mutual transformation rather than one-sided help or instruction. Third, companionship reclaims marginalized voices. Traditional servanthood models have often excluded or undervalued the contribution of women, indigenous peoples, and the formerly colonized communities. As the book argues, those who had no power to give up are often told to model Jesus' self-emptying. This further entrenches passivity and erasure. So companionship affirms the agency of all participants, allowing space for the voices, wisdom, and the leadership of the marginalized to reshape the meaning and the direction of a mission. And companionship embodies decolonial ethics, inspired by Catherine Hawkins' missiology, shaped by post-colonial thinkers such as Spivak, the Kwakpulan, and Homi Bhabha. The book emphasized that companionship emerging in between spaces of cultural encounter or contact zone, recognizes complexities of power, identity, and hybridity, avoids romanticizing mutuality, but insists on ongoing critical reflection and solidarity over charity. In this way, companionship becomes a praxis of resistance, a model that displaces domination and promote just, respectful, and compassionate relationships. So in summary, companionship is important because it redefines diaconia for post-colonial world. It transforms hierarchical mission into mutual engagement. It resists domination by centering justice and dignity. It calls the church into deeper relationality and accountability and solidarity. This theological shift is not just semantic. It is a call to work with, not for, and to be companions rather than servants in God's mission of healing and liberation. In part 4 of the book, we bring post-colonial critique to bear based on Spivak, Kwakpulan, and Bhabha. So to critique colonial structures in theology, and the companionship reclaims the silenced voices and foster solidarity. So we invite people to think about what is servanthood as a traditionally conceived can reinforce power imbalances. Diaconia, properly retrieved, is God's commission mission, not subjugation. Mutuality shifts us from power for to power with. The companionship, as shaped by Haken and the post-colonial critic, offers a diaconial model of mission. Language matters. The words we use to describe ministry shape relationships. If we speak of companionship, we invite the co-responsibility, shared risk, and collective flourishing. So my prayer and our invitation is that each of us returns to our communities and asking, how might we work with rather than serve for? Where can we relinquish the need to help and instead become companions in God's ongoing mission? So here are my questions. What might companionship look like in your context? Well, has mutuality flourished or faltered in your ministry or mission work? How can your local practice of service be reoriented toward the shared agency? Thank you so much for your attention. I look forward to your thought. Again, thanks so much for the invitation. I'm so honored to be in your circle, and my past companion JungHee is kind of also spirits with me and then with you, and then partly I'm one foot in the the Diaconia world, of other foot in my own kind of work, and then so we are making forward as a companions. Thank you.
Thank you.